Well, good day, fifth graders. Mr. Greenfield here. Our goal for today is to be focusing on adding and subtracting of fractions that have like denominators using a model to assist us. So what that looks like, here I have a model set up, and we're going to be using these fraction tiles over here on the left, and our fraction tiles are the size of an eighth. So each of these 8 equal parts make up one whole. So that's the whole object that we're referring to. So let's say for this example, this is a candy bar broken into 8 equal parts. And we're going to be adding 3 of those equal parts to 2 of those equal parts. Now, whenever you're adding or subtracting fractions, as a rule of thumb, we want to make sure that the denominators are the same, or we have a common denominator. For all of our examples that I'm going to show you here today, they're all going to have a common denominator. They have to have a common denominator. The pieces have to be the same size, or you can't add or subtract them. So in our case, they're all going to be this size. They're all going to be the same size. So whenever you're adding or subtracting, multiplying or dividing numbers, it's helpful to make an estimate. Same thing when we're adding fractions. A lot of times it's beneficial to get an estimate so we get a ballpark answer, so we have an idea when we're finished. Are we in the right ballpark, or do we need to go back and look at it? Maybe we made a mistake. So whenever we're estimating fractions, you always want to compare your fraction. Is it closer to 0? Is it closer to a half? Or is it closer to one whole? So I'm going to look up here, and I have 3/8. If this is my whole object, and I know that this is the halfway mark, 1, 2, 3/8, that's pretty close to half. So I'm going to say that's about half. So if I want to do that, I'm going to click on my text here. That's about a half. And I'm going to add that, it says, to 2/8. Well, 2/8, that's a lot closer to 0. So I'm going to say plus 0 is equivalent to about a half. So I know that my answer for my estimate here, when I'm finished, should be close to a half. So 3/8 plus 2/8, or 3 equal parts out of 8, added to 2 equal parts out of 8. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to shade in 3 parts for my 3 out of 8. And I'm going to shade in an additional 2 out of 8 parts. Now, when I look at it, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 out of 8 equal parts, or 3 plus 2 is 5. So I have 5, and I have 8 equal parts. So 5 out of 8, or 5/8 would be my answer. Now, if I look at 5/8, if this is the halfway mark, 5/8 is bigger than a half, but it's pretty close to a half. And my estimate said, well, my answer will be around a half. So I feel pretty confident that I did quite well on my math, and that I'm probably in the right ballpark. I must be right. So if I look at my next problem here, I have 2/5 plus 3/5. So we're using a different size fraction tile. We're going to use fifths. Let's say it's a candy bar again, but we're breaking it into 5 equal parts. And as I said before, we have to have that common denominator to add or subtract. I'm going to do an estimate first. I'm going to get my text box here. So I know that 2/5, well, here is the halfway mark. So it's about 2.5 to get to the halfway mark of my candy bar here. So 2/5 is, it's about a half. And 3/5, 1, 2, 3, is also about a half. So I know that 1/2 and 1/2 equals one whole. So I think my answer is going to be around a whole candy bar. In our case here, we have 2/5, so we're going to shade in 2 parts. There's 1, there's 2/5 shaded in. Okay, I'm going to add to that an additional 3/5. We'll pick this color here, and we'll shade in. Sorry, it's hard to shade in with my trackpad here. Okay, so I've got 3 parts shaded here and 2 parts shaded there. For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts, I have 5 fifths, or 5 out of 5 parts total. So 2/5 plus 3/5 is 5/5, or I equal that out, 1 whole object. If I look at subtraction, I'm going to do subtraction very similarly. If I want to look at that, I have 7/8 of an object. Okay, let's say this is a pizza this time. There's 8 equal slices. We have 7 of them. We're not sure what happened to the other piece. Maybe your little brother came in and ate it. I don't know. But we have 7/8, and we are going to give away or eat or take away 3/8 of that. And it's helpful to do an estimate again. We know that 7/8 is almost the whole object. So that's closer to 1. And we're going to subtract 3/8. Well, 3/8, if this is the halfway mark, 3/8 is pretty close to a half. So 1 minus a half means that we're going to have about a half left over. So my estimate, when I'm all done, I'm going to say it's close to a half. So if I subtract these out, the first thing I want to do is I want to shade in 7/8 of these. As we know, Mr. Greenfield's not very good at shading in using his trackpad on his Chromebook here. So I'm going to shade over 7/8. So here is 7/8 of our, in this case, we said it was a pizza. So 7/8 of a pizza. We started with 7/8. Here we are, 7 out of 8. And we are going to subtract 3/8. Maybe you're going to eat those 3/8. So in our case, we are going to cross those off. That one is gone. We subtracted it. A second one has been subtracted. And now a third one. So if I look at my math here, I have 7/8, which we started with, shaded in black. We subtracted 3 of those 8s. What are we left with? We're left with 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts out of our total of 8. So 4/8. And we know now that 4/8 is the same as a half. So our estimate and our number sentence are jiving there. So 4/8 would be our answer, or we could simplify that fraction to be a half, because 4 is half of 8. If we look at another subtraction example here, this time we're working with 6. We have 5/6 minus 2/6. Once again, it's helpful to do an estimate. Now 5/6, that's pretty close to a whole object. It's pretty close to 1. If I subtract 2/6, now 2/6, let's see, 3/6 would be right here in the middle. 2/6 is pretty close to that, so we have about a half. So that's going to equal about a half when we're done subtracting. So when we're done subtracting, we should have close to a half. Looking at our estimate, one whole object minus a half gives us a half left. So we're going to start with 5, 6. We're going to shade that in. So I'm going to count over 5 out of the 6. I'm going to shade those. And we're going to take away or subtract 2 of those 6. So we're going to get rid of that one and that one. So if those 2 slices of pizza were eaten, what do we have left of our pizza? We have 1, 2, 3. Slices out of 6 remaining, or 3/6 of the pizza. And we know that 3/6 is the same as 1/2.